Hi, and welcome to Michael Talks Business, where all sorts of entrepreneurs give their advice on business. I'm Michael, and today our guest is Edmund Chien from Floki Advisory. Let's get to it. Hi, Edmund. Thank you for joining us today. First, tell us a lot about your business.
Sure. Floki Advisory is the name of our company, and we're a consulting firm. I like to say that we're a soft skills consulting firm.
So, consulting firm, what does that mean? What do you actually do for small businesses, entrepreneurs?
Right. We advise businesses that are catering to luxury brands or high net worth clients to give them further insight into how high net worth people think.
So, from your experience, how long, if somebody like a new entrepreneur starts a business doing anything, how long do you think it takes for an entrepreneur to actually start becoming successful, to start making money from what they want to do?
That's a good question, Mike. My answer is probably never. I'm just kidding. It feels like that, but really, I think the real answer is it depends on how much time you put into it. And when you start a new business, what we'll commonly hear is people start it sometimes as a side job, and there comes a time when you're an entrepreneur to make a definitive decision: is this a hobby or is this a full-time thing for you? And if you decide to go to full-time, then you spend the amount of time. Like some people will work 60 hours a week, other people will give it 1 or 2 hours a week. So it depends on how long you give it. If you're taking a full-time job and you do it as a full-time job, working anywhere between 40 to 60 hours a week, it'll take a lot less, maybe 2-3 years, but it depends on a number of different factors.
So I'm kind of happy that you actually mentioned that doing it part-time versus, leaving your job and going all out on your business. Sometimes I guess most of the time, that's very, very risky for a lot of people.
Absolutely.
If you have a good job, very stable, a monthly paycheck, and then you just leave all that to start a business. Right. Is that really the smartest thing to do?
Well, let me say this. I will tell people that being an entrepreneur is not for the faint of heart. It's almost like, and people have asked me, it's like, Ed, how have you guys become successful, or what makes you successful? And my kind of offhand comment is, well, I'm too stupid to realize I can fail. But there's a little bit of truth in that, and I'll give you an example. I don't know if you knew this about me, Mike, but I spent 10 years in the Canadian military, and I was a paratrooper. I was a paratrooper. So people would ask, and there's a certain type of person that would be able to throw themselves out of a moving plane. Right. And people would say, well, you have to be a little crazy, I would say a little stupid to do that. Absolutely. But if you do it, if you train for it and you push yourself and you're disciplined, you can survive. So that's why it's not for the faint of heart. Entrepreneurship is very similar.
What Edmund is saying is you have to be a little crazy if you want to start a business.
A little crazy if you want to start a business. So there's an interesting thing they say about paratroopers, and this is the sort of meme that they have. They have a guy jumping out of a plane, and it says, this is what jump course is like. They'll say, week 1, what you do is you separate the men from the boys. All right. Week 2, you separate the men from the men from the fools.
All right.
And then week 3, you jump the fools. So I tell people, it's like, you gotta be a little crazy, you gotta be a little foolish to become an entrepreneur. It's very similar.
Yeah. Okay. So if, let's say, somebody does take that first step to become an entrepreneur, has a stable job, and he's doing maybe 3-4 hours a day, just doing his entrepreneurial thing and doing a part-time job, when is it the right time, in your opinion, to go full out, just go and jump onto the entrepreneurship and leave your job and take that risk? Do you think that that's something that's, there's a specific time for that?
Yeah,
how would you know?
I think we have a saying, and I spent 15 years in financial services as an advisor, and we have a saying that when we bring on a new client, you have to know your client. So before you can give any kind of investment advice, it has to be what we call meet within somebody's risk parameters. So my answer to that is very similar to that, which is when is it right for somebody to jump into full-time entrepreneurship? It really depends on somebody's risk parameters. So if somebody is single, they're in their 20s and they're living in their parents' basement and they don't have to pay a mortgage, that has a different my suggestion to that individual would be different than somebody who has a high-paying job, maybe $100,000 job, and they've got 5 kids at home and their spouse doesn't work. The answer for that person will be very different, right? Because so it has to depend on the individual, right? And what their risk what kind of risks are they taking to go into a full-time entrepreneur? Because sometimes they'll be taking a lot more risk. The person with the family is taking on a tremendous amount of risk versus the person that's at home, living at their parents' house.
Right. So would you suggest that it would be smarter for people to kind of plan ahead? They have a stable job. Make sure you save up enough to live off for, let's say, 3, 4, 6 months, in case that your entrepreneurial venture doesn't.
Yeah,
doesn't really
I am not, Mike. I am not the guy to ask for safe. It's because I am the paratrooper. Go a little too aggressive. Go full on. But that's something that I accept. The risk that I accept for myself. But I also bring to my wife. So my wife and I have to be comfortable with that. And I think that's very important for a family structure.
Can I ask you, when you started your venture, you were married already?
Yes.
Okay, so you had somebody who can maybe support.
Right, and so my wife has a full-time job, works for one of the banks. Okay. So that lessened my risk. Do you understand? Right, yes. So in anything that we do in investment industry, when we evaluate any kind of investment, and keep in mind, when you start a business, it is an investment. Right, so investment in time, investment in money, there's other things that we'll be talking about. But you also have to take a look at the risk. So what is the risk versus the reward? So when you look at the risk and it's smaller, even though there is risk, if it's smaller than your potential reward, then it's a worthwhile endeavor. But if you look at it and you have to take substantial risk and the reward is unlikely or not so for sure, then that's where you have to find that balance. Once that plays out where you can see that your reward is going to be significantly higher than your risk, then it makes it for a good venture.
Right. So maybe this is a good time for you to talk to a little bit of the difficulties that you faced when you were just starting out. Sure. Some of the hardships of starting a venture. When
you start a venture, one of the biggest hardships you'll find, and I've worked for a lot of other entrepreneurs. I used to manage money for entrepreneurs, so I would see their perspective as well, and that's really where I gained it. So I learned a lot of business development from them. One thing that is unique to all of them is when they first started out, there's an incredible amount of sleepless nights, and you will doubt yourself. Yes. And you have to be very careful about that negative self-talk.
Right. So what do you do to sort of, combat that?
You have to be stupid to forget that.
Crazy. You have to be
crazy. You have to be crazy and stupid to forget your negative self-talk.
Right.
Because if you're a reasonable person, just like you're saying, a reasonable person would not jump out of a plane, right?
Exactly.
And you have to remind yourself why, and then and what I advise is replay your risk and reward scenario, and then you recognize, yes, this is why I'm doing it, or else your self-doubt will get you, and next thing you know, you'll hold a government job where it's nice and safe and secure, and you get a government pension.
Right, but you're not really doing what you love necessarily.
Right, so you go after your passion. Exactly. So those are the trade-offs.
So, Edmund, tell me, when you started your business, I think one of the most difficult things that people are facing when they're starting a business is those first 1 to 5 clients. How was that for you? How did you go about acquiring those clients?
Well, the interesting thing about Floki Advisory is that my entire core staff, we're all prospectors. We're all salespeople. So that's what gave me a lot of confidence, a lot of comfort.
Right.
And we have a core philosophy at Floki Advisory. And one of the core philosophies we have is a Zig Ziglar quote, which is, you can have everything you want in life if you just help enough other people get what they want in life. So one of the things that we do in order to bring in every client, including our first clients that we started to bring in, is look to meet other people, and we do a tremendous amount of networking. And when you go out, everybody is looking for something. So what you do is you tap into that to listen to other people first. And it's so rare that you really stand out, to look at what other people are looking for in life and how can we help them get that, regardless if it improves our situation or not. So give first, and then eventually you start to build this big network, and then they start to reciprocate. It will start to pull back together.
Another very important question that I get asked all the time is, when you start a business, is it a better idea to self-finance, or is it a better idea to go out and actually, actively look for investors?
The way to answer that question, I would say, is it depends on do you like having parents or not? All right. So, and it's very similar to that. It's like, Some people will have great parents, and they can be good guidance for you and good direction. Some people will have parents that are way too overbearing and just drive you crazy, and becomes a very dysfunctional relationship. Business is no different. So I've seen multiple businesses where an individual was running it by themselves and self-financed, and that in itself can be dangerous too, because you don't have anybody else to guide you.
Right.
But at the same time, you make all the final decisions. So there's benefits there. On the other side of it, I've seen businesses where they've had investors, and the downside is that the investors become way too restrictive.
Is that a necessity? Like, does that happen all the time?
No. It's just like it can. It's just like some parents are good and some parents are terrible, right? And some backers for investors in your company can be good and good guidance for you, and then some of them can be actually very polluting and very dysfunctional for your team. So if you're going to bring in investors that are going to that you're going to fund your company with, be very selective on who they are. It's just like picking your parents. Be very careful when you pick. It's like picking corporate parents.
Right. Something that kind of goes hand in hand with investors. Would you say it's a good idea to have partners in your business?
Partners can be very damaging because, especially if it's a 50-50 partnership, it can be very damaging because there's a lot of infighting and argument's sake. But I've also seen...
Well, nobody thinks alike. That's a given.
That's part of it. And the other question I ask people is, think about when you were back in school. Have you ever thought of a school project where you worked as a team where it was completely perfect?
Never.
Exactly. So if that's the case, that's why a partnership is the worst ship that ever sailed. So, but what do you do? Because there are benefits to having key people working with you.
Well, wouldn't you say sometimes it could be very beneficial?
It can be very beneficial, but here's the structure that I recommend, and this is the structure I take. And it falls under this philosophy that a rope with 3 cords is not easily broken. A rope with 3 cords is not easily broken. So what does that mean? One of them is that I am the president of Flowcap Advisory. I'm the only partner. I make the full decisions. I'm the final say. I'm the veto. But that can also be very dangerous because in some aspects I could be diluted. Right. So where are my other 2 cords? My other 2 cords, and every business, regardless of its size, should have a board of directors. So when you're a small business, you don't need to have a formal board of directors, but I highly encourage having a mentor. And when you're one person in a company and you have a mentor, that de facto is kind of like working like a board of directors to give you some guidance. Right. But at the end of the day, I make the final decision.
So that mentor has no real final say. He can suggest things.
Yeah, it's like I advise you to do these things. I've been here before, all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, you can say, thank you very much. I appreciate your input. Right. And you can even go against it. However, it's good to have that guidance. Right. Eventually, that mentor and then a couple of other mentors, as you grow your business, would eventually become your board of directors. And in that board of directors, is interesting enough, you asked about questions about being an investor. An investor will also take a look at your board of directors to see who's guiding you. Right. Now, the third strand is have an incredibly strong team that you listen to. And it's very modern today to have that. In previous years, I would say in previous decades, X-Gen and baby boomers, the way that we would work with our staff is we make the final say. We would look at our board of directors. That's only 2 cords. But I've grown now working with millennial cohorts to realize that it's very important because the world is changing so fast. And the millennial cohort has so many things that they are changing the tide of how things are going. Right. So at me as an X-Gen, the third chord for me is listening to my team. And seeing
get a flow of new ideas.
And get a flow of new ideas and how and understanding where their perspective is, right, and taking that into consideration. But ultimately, I make the final decision. So I get information from both sides. I get input from my mentors and my board of directors, and I also get input from my staff, and then I make those decisions. That's how we are a 3-chord rope.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Edmund, for being here today.
It's my pleasure.
Please visit his website. It's flocapadvisory.com and on their Instagram, flocapadvisory. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, like, share, all that goodness. And until next time.